Hi, Dr. Lilly, Dr. Beekler. First, I want to thank you guys for giving me an extension on doing this presentation and allowing me to miss class to go to the Fed Challenge. Although we only took second place, I really had a great time and a great experience at the competition. But without further ado, I want to get into my presentation. Over the summer, I read No Man's Land, and I'm going to take you guys through more of a theme analysis. I'm going to start with a brief synopsis of the book and then really move into the summary of the themes that were driven throughout the novel itself, and then kind of some of the questions that were perked to my interest about some of the things that we might experience while we're in Vietnam in January. So, giving a little brief overview, the novel starts out with the setting in a mountain hamlet, which is it's a rural village in the hills of Vietnam, and takes place with the main character is Min, who unexpectedly experiences the return of her first husband, who was presumed dead in the war in Vietnam, and he was gone for 14 years. During which time, Min remarried her second husband, Hone, and now has a new son. So she now has the choice between two different lives, returning to her first husband to live in poverty or to remain with her second husband, in which she's actually really now in a much more sufficient, self-sufficient, very actually wealthy lifestyle. So she has these two polar opposite trends, really the choice between stern family traditions and her will of free will and being with the man she truly loves. And the rest of the novel really goes with living through the consequences of her decision, of the life that she would live with Bon, and really the effects that this choice has on Hone and all three of the characters as a whole. So now, after that, I really want to take you through the themes that I see throughout this novel. One of the big things that is actually the theme of the lifestyle differences in location. We have two starkly different places. We have the mountain village that takes place with Min and after she returns with Bone, and then we had that completely opposite lifestyle in the city where Hone decides that it is much better for him to remove himself from the situation and return to his family to be with his sisters in Nan Trang and continue to run his successful business without the constant reminder of Min in the mountain village. So when we see this, we really get these two drastically different lifestyles, entirely different values, entirely different professions, and just entirely different ways of life. We see the stark contrasts between the rural and agricultural based city life or rural life in the mountain hamlet versus the much more fast paced, much more modern sense in the city when Hone returns to Nan Trang in the ocean city. It's much more filled with markets. We get exposed to the corruption and the rings of prostitution that go throughout the city, much different than the things that we see in the much more plantation based lifestyle up in the mountains, where it is much more based on a survival, family traditions, the traditional Confucian practices of Vietnam, contrasted to the much more modern style in the cities. And throughout the novel, this is really used as a backdrop that is a poster for the actual characterization that's made throughout the novel. And it's a really stark contrast that one of the questions I actually have is how prevalent this is today. And moving forward, it's really the theme of war. Bone's return into the situation and the ensuing consequences are truly brought on by his sacrifice for war. War was seen as the honorable thing to do, as it is in most cultures. It's very true for the United States in the past. Being a soldier is an honorable thing to serve one's country. And Bone represents the taking the path of honorable tradition, becoming a soldier. He gets married right before 18 to Min, someone that he fell in love with, and then he goes off to the front. And during the horrible reality that is war, he was presumed dead. And when he returns, we at first see him in the town's eyes as the hero, but truly we find out that there are things that he can never unsee, he can never forget that happened in war. He is very heavily influenced by post-traumatic stress disorder. He has several physical ailments that inhibit his ability to work, that inhibit his ability to perform, and that have all been brought by his service. And throughout the novel, there are numerous flashbacks to horrific scenes of the war where he lost his friends. And we really find out that this theme, it never leaves him until the very end of the book. Bowen is haunted by these ghosts that plague his mind, and he oftentimes throughout the books makes reference to things that he's seen in the war, to why these things happened, why did these horrible things happen to him. And it's one of the things that we realize that this is a narrow view of something that can be extrapolated. That this is there were millions of 18 to 19-year-old to 20-year-old men similar to Bone that went to war, survived, and then had to face the consequences returning home, the physical ailments, the traumatic disorders. And it's something that is inherent with war in general, and it's something that we see in a microcosm within the book. And then the third thing that I want to take you through, the last theme I really want to hit on, is the pressures from society. Starting from the very beginning of the book, they very heavily influence Mine's decision to leave her lovely life with home and return to Bone and live in poverty, in essence. From a society standpoint, living and returning with Bone is seen as the honorable traditional path to honor your first love, to honor your husband who sacrificed his own life, his own teenaged, his early 20s years to serve his country, or staying in the financial stability of Hone, the man that she truly loves, the man that she has a son. She is very pressured by the rest of her mountain town to do the honorable and just thing and return to the man that she loves, who sacrificed himself for her. And this theme, this pressure from society that really drives the rest of the book, leads us to believe that there's this heavy importance on family and tradition and these Confucian traditions in Vietnam, that these personal relationships don't necessarily just exist from family to sibling, but they're very, even the language itself is very much driven by a relationship among the people of Vietnam. Throughout the book, we notice that people are even married couples refer to themselves as older brother, older sister, uncle. And it's this very family-based tradition within Vietnam that remains throughout the entire book. And this pressure from society on Minh truly drives the struggle and the strife that we see throughout the rest of the book. The idea that returning to Bone and doing the honorable thing at first seemed like the traditional proper thing to do, but towards the end of the story, the town really understands that what happened in the very beginning of the novel was largely driven by who had the power at the time. Bon is seen as the heroic survivor of war in the beginning, but towards the end, he's truly seen as a madman, whereas Hone is seen as the heroic protagonist at the end, providing a school for the town, bringing education to this uneducated town, to truly showing unbiased in morality and wealth without prejudice. So we see that this pressure from society drives the outcome of these two characters. Some of the questions that I have moving forward from this, based on these themes that I've identified, is, are these traditions, these differences between lifestyles, something that we'll still see in Vietnam today? I know that we're not going to be in the countryside as often, but will we see these stark contrasts between the agricultural life that still exists in a lot of Vietnam today versus the much more modernized city life that we'll be experiencing? Does this stark contrast still exist? And also, how prevalent is the war still today? I remember being abroad last January throughout Europe. There are large portions of Europe that still feel the effects of World War II today, where you can see buildings that were destroyed in the bombings, and it's still very real today, especially being in Croatia during what was the Bosnian War only 15 years ago. The effects of that war are still very visible. I'm really curious. I'm actually very curious to see how real this war is. And also, is Bond's condition more of an anomaly or really not uncommon? I mean, the fact that there were just a sheer size of these young men that went off to war, how real is this reality still today? How heavily impacted is the post-traumatic stress disorder? And how much has it impacted where the society's at today? And these are just a few of the many questions I still have, and hopefully we'll get to see some of the answers. But I'm more than excited to see an entirely new way of life and get to experience a truly different world than I've ever been in before. Um, I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions that you have for me. If the link doesn't work, please let me know. And I once again want to thank you for letting me have this extension. And I look forward to seeing you guys on our next meeting on Reading Day. And hope you guys have a great week.